Matt Walsh, I have never called you a racist.
You say that I would be too scared to say the N-word to a black guy because I don't want to be physically assaulted or killed.
But here's what I'm not gonna do.
You cannot do something and then tell other people not to do it.
I'm not gonna allow respect for your past points to excuse your present failures. I used to respect you.
You call him a Okay, why don't you have the boss to say it right now again? Huh?
My point is that there is an insanely flagrant double standard around the word. You helpfully demonstrated that as well by using the word at least a dozen times in your...
Matt Walsh, let me say something to you. Something I thought I'd never need to say. I used to respect you. Not in a fanboy way, not because I agree with every word, but because I respected your willingness to stand in the fire when it was unpopular. I watched What is a Woman. I watched Am I a Racist? I've watched you dismantle weak ideologies, hold firm against emotional manipulation, and challenge the narratives that have left this generation confused and spineless. On a lot of those fronts, we stood shoulder to shoulder. I am a black man in America, and still I listen to you without bias, without offense, because you were often the only one willing to say what others wouldn't. I didn't just tolerate that, I admired it. I was raised to value truth over comfort, and truth doesn't always come in the packaging we prefer. But here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to allow respect for your past points to excuse your present failures. This isn't about free speech. This isn't about cancel culture. This isn't about whether or not the N-word should be a universal term. This is about an adult woman weaponizing the most historically loaded slur in the English language against a child, a black autistic child at that, and watching grown adults rush to reward her for it. And then there's you. You stood up, not for the child, not for the principal, not for dignity, but for the woman who said it. And not just with your words, but with your dismissals, your framing, your ridicule of those who said, this is wrong. And you justified it by pointing to the double standard of black people using the word amongst themselves, as if that somehow nullifies the cruelty of her intent. Matt, let's pause here. Let's not go any further until we get one thing clear. You've spoken boldly against emotionalism in politics for years. You've condemned the weaponization of feelings over facts. Yet now, suddenly, you're ignoring the facts and clinging to the weakest emotional defense of all. But they say it too. That argument didn't hold up in kindergarten. And let me say something else carefully and clearly. I have never called you a racist, and I won't do that now. Not because I think you're above it, but because I don't throw that word around lightly. Not everyone who critiques the culture is against the people in it. You can love something and still question it. I get that. But Matt, what I don't get is why after all these years, I can't recall a single time you've publicly celebrated anything black. No black leaders, no black authors, artists, thinkers, or trailblazers. Not a word of recognition, just critique. You criticize the victim mentality, but you don't acknowledge the historical systems that created the victimization in the first place. You hold the microphone, you hold the audience, you hold influence, but you refuse to hold up a mirror. And that's where you start to lose me. That's where millions of us start to wonder if you're fighting for truth or if you're just fighting us.
For a long time in this country, there has been a rule surrounding this word. The rule stipulates that the word is so unspeakably evil that if a white person says it, you can physically assault him. And if you say it as a black person, it's not offensive or even vulgar in the slightest.
This isn't me canceling you. This isn't me shouting you down. This is me standing where I'll always stand, where reason meets reality. And today, you're on the wrong side of both. Let's kill the distraction right now. This is not about whether white people can say the N-word. That's the cheap bait in the water. That's the surface level noise that people grab onto so they don't have to confront the sonic boom underneath. What happened wasn't a philosophical question about language. It wasn't a hypothetical classroom debate. It was a real life moment where a white woman, fully grown, fully aware, looked at a young black boy with autism and chose to call him a nigger. She didn't stumble onto the word like someone accidentally brushing against the stove. She used it like a weapon, and she used it in anger, not out of curiosity, confusion, or camaraderie, but out of contempt. That's the heart of the matter. Because if you say a word with the intent to dehumanize, humiliate, and belittle, it doesn't matter if someone else uses it differently. That's not a double standard, that's context. But this is the thing. If your freedom of speech demands the right to use the language of slave masters because you're annoyed by modern boundaries, then maybe your version of freedom isn't as noble as you think. It's not about the word, it's about the will to dominate. And that's what this debate always becomes when people ignore context, when they reduce centuries of horror into a playground argument about fairness. You don't get to colonize a word just because you're tired of asking why you can't use it, especially when it's a word never meant for you in the first place. Let's stop pretending this is about equality of word usage. Let's stop acting like the real grievance here is fairness, as if what's fueling this debate is just some innocent curiosity about linguistic consistency. It's not. This is about power, tone, timing. It's about intent. Because here's the truth. I didn't care when white people used the word nigga growing up. I've had white friends say it around me all the time. We grew up together, same street, same struggle, no pretense, no poison, no undertone of mockery or malice. They weren't tourists in my culture. They lived it. They understood the context. That's key. I didn't hand out a pass. They earned it through trust in the relationship. Nobody was outraged when Leonardo DiCaprio said nigger in Django Unchained. Why? Because he was acting. He was playing a racist, not being one. Nobody tried to cancel Jackie Chan for saying, "What's up, my nigga?" in Rush Hour 2, because the entire setup was a commentary on misunderstanding and culture clashes. It was a joke on him, not us. Nobody boycotted Robert Downey Jr. for Tropic Thunder. The whole character was a satirical mirror held up to Hollywood itself. The joke was about method acting gone wrong, gone too far, not black people. It's not about saying the word, it's how, why, and what for. That's what determines everything. You know how we know? Because you wouldn't dare apply the same logic to any other situation. So let's dig deeper. The idea that marginalized people can't reshape their language is a lie told by people who've never had to survive being defined by someone else's words. If you've never been caricatured, chained, or killed over a syllable, of course you'll scoff at the idea that a word has weight. But for the oppressed, words don't just carry meaning, they carry memory. Now,
So it's the first ultra taboo in the English language or any other language in the history of the world, as far as I know, that switches off suddenly depending on the skin pigmentation of the person saying it.
reclamation is how the wounded start to heal their own scars. Let's go back through history and make this crystal clear. This isn't a black people are special argument, it's a human pattern. In the military, Marines use slang jokes, even racial jabs among each other in ways that would get a civilian beat down. It's not because the words are safe, it's because they've endured something together. There's a context, code, a bond. You wouldn't walk into a Marine barracks, mimic the language, and expect to be embraced. You'd get stomped out because you didn't earn the language, you didn't live it, you didn't bleed in it. The word queer was used to humiliate gay men and lesbians, but now the LGBTQ community took it, turned it around, and made it an umbrella term for empowerment and solidarity. You hear queer studies in universities, queer eye wins Emmy. No one walks into a gay bar shouting queer as a slur anymore unless they're looking for a problem. And if a straight man like myself said it, they try to check me. Why? Because it's not mine to use like that. Context, history, boundaries. Carning, short for carnival workers, is a term born from grit and sweat and surviving on the road in America's traveling circuses. Within this community, it's a badge of honor. Carnies talk to carnies like family. But let someone outside of their world say it and it's suddenly condescending, degrading, like they're mocking a subculture they don't understand. Same word, different mouth, different meaning.
So it's the first ultra taboo in the English language or any other language in the history of the world, as far as I know, that switches off suddenly depending on the skin pigmentation of the person saying it.
Even way. Ask any Mexican or Chicano que anda way means. It's brotherhood, playfulness, camaraderie. But let a random outsider toss it around in the wrong tone, especially without knowing the culture or language behind it, and it gets awkward fast. If not offensive, it's not that the word itself is off limits, it's that the access to it is earned through experience, community, and context. When black people say nigga to each other, it's not the same word that was spat out on slave ships, auction blocks, lynching trees, or Jim Crow courtrooms. It's not the same word that was snarled by sheriffs, screamed by segregationists, or tattooed into police reports like a brand. It evolved, it transformed through trauma, through defiance, through culture. Black people took a slur, soaked in blood and flipped it into a code, sometimes of brotherhood, sometimes of irony, sometimes of raw expression. So, why is it so hard to accept that nigga, not nigger, has undergone a similar evolution amongst black people? Because that would mean recognizing that we've done something powerful with pain, that we've taken one of the worst words in the American dictionary and made it something that connects us instead of kills us. That's reclamation. That's culture surgery. That's a miracle most people can't even fathom. And yet, people like Matt Walsh call it hypocrisy. But it's not hypocrisy, it's alchemy. It's turning lead into gold. It's taking the language of chains and making it into the rhythm of freedom. It's calling your brother my nigga after surviving neighborhoods that were designed to bury you both. It's sharing a joke, a beat, a bond, a laugh with someone who understands, not someone who's just curious. The word doesn't mean black friend, it means I see you. I've lived what you lived. I felt what you felt. I get it. White people were never the targets of nigga. They were the architects of nigger. That's the difference. One was born on a plantation. The other was born in the cipher. One came with chains. The other came with beats. So when a white commentator tries to flatten all that history into, well, if you say it, I should be able to too, they're not asking for equality. They're asking for access. History has a name for that kind of behavior: colonialism. And sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is say no. The moment black people create their own codes, claim their own space, or define their own language, the pushback begins. And so we get men like Matt Walsh pretending this is about hypocrisy or inconsistency when what it really is history repeating itself. See, power hates fences it didn't build. And even more than that, it hates the idea that someone else might find freedom on the other side of it. So let's be clear. The fury over this word isn't just about a slur, it's about cultural sovereignty. It's about the fact that we took something meant to degrade us and made it into a language of survival, pain, and yes, sometimes even joy. And you don't get to decide what we do with that. You never did. Freedom of speech is often the rallying cry, but let's be real. Freedom to speak without consequence is not freedom, it's entitlement. Matt Walsh's position is rooted in this idea that freedom of speech means he should be able to say anything, and face no pushback. But this is where the conversation always loses its way. We live in a world of rights, yes. But with every right comes responsibility. And responsibility requires a balance, a discipline, which is why we don't let people yell fire in a crowded room. We don't let people slander others without repercussions. This is why we don't let people incite violence. So, why is it that when it comes to the use of a historically charged word like nigger, we act like there should be no moral accountability? It's one thing to say, I have the right to say it, but the real test of character is not whether you can say something, it's whether you should. Matt Walsh, the self-proclaimed defender of free speech, wants to point to the right to use this word as if it's like an indisputable fact. But where's the responsibility? Where's the respect? Where's the recognition that some words were forged in a furnace of oppression, pain, and degradation? This isn't some academic exercise. This is real life. It's the difference between me knowing that I can speak my mind and choosing to do so with wisdom and grace, or deciding to let my ego dictate every syllable, every sentence without regard for the consequence. Matt, this isn't a lecture on political correctness. This is about respect, understanding that the world is not a vacuum, understanding that the very tools you wield, the words you use, can either build bridges or burn them. The truth is, when you stand on the side of freedom of speech at the expense of human dignity, you're not standing up for liberty, you're standing in the way of it. You may be technically right, Matt, but you're morally wrong. And so, here we are, Matt. You've built your name on boldness, on saying what others are afraid to say, on challenging narratives and breaking molds, calling out hypocrisy wherever you see it. You said what many thought were too scared to voice, and you did it with conviction. But this time, you're not standing for truth, you're standing in your own way. You're not fighting the system here, you are the system. You're not protecting freedom of speech, you're stomping on the lessons history has handed us time and time again. You're not exposing hypocrisy, you're reinforcing a centuries-old wound under the guise of principle. This is where you must ask yourself, do I want to be remembered as another man who couldn't humble himself enough to learn, or one who had the courage to evolve? You see, wisdom is not just about holding the line, it's about knowing when to move it. Power is not just in speaking, but in knowing when to be silent. And legacy? Legacy is built on how you treated those who had less power than you when you had every chance to crush them and chose not to. You can argue over words, over culture, over who is allowed to say what. But if we can't all agree that it is morally wrong for an adult to weaponize a racial slur against a child, then you've abandoned humanity for ideology. You've chosen to be right instead of being decent. This was a test, and a lot of people failed it. They didn't just reveal how much they care about free speech, they revealed how little they care about other people. Let history remember who stood tall when the moment called for decency, not defensiveness. Let it remember who had the wisdom to know the difference between liberty and license. And let it remember that in the face of injustice, silence or worse, applause makes you complicit. This isn't about censorship. This isn't about cancel culture. This is about conscience. You can be right in your facts and wrong in your spirit. And right now, your spirit is veering towards the same cold, arrogant blindness that made the most shameful chapters in Western history. You've said a lot about truth, but truth isn't just what you say. It's how you say it, why you say it, and what impact it leaves behind. And the truth, Matt, is that this time you missed the mark. You are not being silenced. You are being called to grow, to reflect, to rise. What will you do? Because at the end of the day, no one's asking you to bow. We're asking you to see, not just with your eyes, but with your soul, to remember that freedom without empathy is just tyranny in a prettier suit. The mic is in your hands now, Mike, and the world is watching. Speak wisely. If you've made it this far, then maybe, just maybe, you still believe in something deeper than likes and echo chambers. So here's what I'm asking. Speak up. Not just when it's easy, not just when it's trending, but when it's right. Challenge your heroes, even the ones who got you thinking, especially the ones you agree with most. Protect the powerless, because a society that can't defend its children has already failed. Learn history, not the whitewashed version, the real one, the one with blood and chains and laws that tried to bury us alive. And understand this. You don't need to be black to get it. You just need to be human. This isn't about being woke. It's about being awake. So if you're tired of watching the same old story play out again and again, good people staying quiet while cruelty gets applause, then don't be quiet. Be the interruption. Be the one who says, no, not this time, because history is watching. And when your kids ask where you stood, let your answer be something they'll be proud to repeat. Thank you.